Hello, 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 friends. Nicholas here with DIVO, TED Talks, Devoted Talks, depending on how you want to say it, where we take ancient wisdom and practices through a modern lens and experience to help end suffering in the lives of you and your loved ones. So, sometimes I go back and forth because I think if somebody interviewed me and asked me questions about Ayurveda and yoga, I could really have a lot more focus when I produce these. But I also like the free form such as it is. But I was having conversations with my client yesterday, and he has upped his membership to go more in depth into Ayurveda and have more private sessions to talk about stuff like that. And I enjoy it because in those moments, oftentimes I'm able to tune into the answers that they need directly, and then stuff comes out that I haven't even spent time thinking about, but it just appears. And I really enjoy it. So I may do a Q&A format at some point that I think would be very helpful and very impactful for people. That being said, some of the things we were talking about is, he talked about a spiritual, I don't know if it's a discipline or spiritual way of looking at things called ashe, and how everything's are these like little whirlpools and spin-offs of existence. I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? If you look at galaxies and you look at the way things move when you can visually see the forces expanding, right? Like, have you ever walked backwards in water and in the pool, and then you create whirlpools as the stationary meets the force of the movement? Anyway, creates these eddies, right? Maybe you've seen eddies when you were out on a creek or a river, crick if you're from Wisconsin. And what we got to talking about is, we like to put all of these things into nice compartments and boxes with pretty bows and understanding. And in reality, the only reason that Ayurveda exists is because there was so much suffering for humans at the time that the rishis were tapping into those levels of consciousness that they went there. But what's interesting is, in the Western world, there is this glorification sometimes of Eastern ideal. And the only reason that the Eastern wisdom exists is because of a Western type existence necessitating the emergence of the Eastern type methodology. And what's even more interesting right now is if you talk to people from India, a lot of them want to be and feel like the West as far as the way they live their lives. And the West, in many ways, especially in America, are trying to turn back for healing into the Eastern disciplines. And so we've delineated them into this progenitor and this outcome. The progenitor and this, not outcome, there's progenitor and this potential egression into the West, and that we're catching up. But when in reality, we actually are going towards the healing, and the people that have lived in that healing or come from areas that lived in that healing are moving towards the way, the West has been living. And it's just a very interesting thing, right? It's all cyclical. And, what came up to me is, thinking about the whirlpool, but if you could overlay that whirlpool or that eddy image with a yin and yang symbol. And so there's always a piece of the other in the opposite, but then also where the one is expanding, the other is diminished, and it's cyclically going around and around, expanding and contracting. And that's essentially life. That's breathing, right? Expanding and contracting. Thoughts expand and then they contract. It's the way of the world. It's the way of life. And so what I was encouraging my client and myself to do was to move away from this thought about a superior and an inferior way of approaching life, right? The only reason we call, Ayurveda a holistic discipline is because we're comparing it to what we do in more of allopathy and the Western way of medicine, which is treatment oriented rather than a systemic healing in the center, so that the whole system works better and more efficiently and is not compatible with disease. And so we call that holistic, but holistic only exists if you have something that is not holistic. Right? I think I'm going to butcher it because I would have to see the accents on and diacritics on the letters, but it's Santana Dharma, and it's it's what they call the original religion or the way of believing um, in India, right? It wasn't Hinduism; it was this Sanatana Dharma, which is like a righteous. Oh, I have to look it up because I'm not going to do this because I don't prep for these. Unless it's right in my mind at that moment, sometimes I miss it. So just hold on one second. Pronounce it correctly and get the right direction. The eternal way, or the righteous way, or it encompasses universal, non-negotiable virtues, including truth, non-injury, ahimsa, purity, and self-restraint. Sanatana, I don't think that's correct. Anyway, Sanatana Dharma, the eternal duties or the righteous duties or the eternal righteous duties. Anyway, but it's essentially saying this is the way. Like actually, in the Star Wars world and the Mandalorian, they say it is the way, or the way. And it's a similar idea to that, where it's not that we're trying to do anything. We're not trying to be holistic. It's the way, because that is what exists. That is what the universe is. That is what life is, right? Ayurveda stands for the science of life. And it's this scientific understanding of the way of things so that we can heal because we understand how it works. And so it's a biohack, which I hate that term. It is a spirituality hack. Also don't like that. That helps you understand what's happening and why you went out of balance or out of harmony. And so then you can use the knowledge that you have to bring yourself back into that harmony, into that balance, into that wholeness. So, how do we bring this all together? Holistic is an idea. Being human is an idea. Suffering is a shared experience in being human, but mostly because we have stepped away from our natural rhythms in a way that doesn't allow us to understand suffering in a frame or context that it belongs. That's not saying it doesn't hurt, but that's saying that I understand that the hurt creates something else, much like working out sometimes can create burn in the muscles or even soreness later, but eventually that turns into the strength or the adaptation to whatever it is that you are attempting to do. And so grief, in my opinion, is a spiritual strengthening. It is a resistance training in and of itself. But life in and of itself is a resistance training field, and if we let it be happening to us rather than us being present and participating in it, then we aren't able to show up well. It's not that we won't get through it and we won't pass go. It's just that we do it efficiently and we do it within the framework so that it builds us up rather than tears us down. It's like building something so that you don't get wind burnt, but rather that the wind carries you or your vehicle with it so that you are moving faster, moving more efficiently, rather than getting your skin burned off. I don't know who that was for, but I had a very strong visual for it. So my friends, take what you like and leave the rest, but just know that the intention of this podcast is to help you be well and to be free. of the suffering that the world carries in loads.